Welcome back to History Rewritten. Today, we enter the mind of one of history's most legendary conquerors, Alexander the Great. In just over a decade, he carved an empire stretching from Greece to India. He never lost a battle. His enemies called him unstoppable. His men called him king. And in every corner of the world he marched, his legend grew. But what if Alexander's ambition was matched not just by genius, but by the power of technology thousands of years ahead of his time? What if, instead of spears and bronze shields, Alexander commanded tanks, jets, missiles, and satellites? What if he could fight not with formations of hoplites, but with battalions of modern soldiers, backed by nuclear firepower? Would he have united the world centuries before Rome rose? Would democracy and religion, as we know it, even exist? Or would humanity have been locked in an endless empire, ruled by a god-king with weapons beyond imagination? This is the story of Alexander the Great, reborn with modern warfare. And remember, this is not the history you were taught. This is history rewritten. It is 336 BCE. The world is a patchwork of empires and kingdoms. In the West, the young Roman Republic is still just a regional power, untested and fragile. In the East, Persia reigns supreme, stretching from Anatolia to the Indus Valley, a massive empire of cities, roads, and wealth. Egypt, still ancient even then, lies under Persian rule, its monuments standing as echoes of past glory. And in Greece itself, city-states like Athens and Sparta remain proud but divided. Into this world steps Alexander, 20 years old, ambitious, educated by Aristotle himself, trained in war by his father Philip II. He inherits a powerful army, but in our story, he inherits something more. Imagine his astonishment as his generals unveil not just spears and shields, but rifles, tanks, helicopters, drones. Imagine the terror of his enemies when his army marches not with horses and phalanxes, but with armored columns and fighter jets screaming across the sky. The stage is set for conquest beyond imagination. Alexander's first task is to cement his control over Greece. In reality, this was no simple thing. Athens was proud of its democracy. Sparta clung to its military traditions. Thebes, bold and independent, resisted Macedonian rule. Normally, Alexander used brilliant tactics and overwhelming force to bring them into line. But now, the balance shifts entirely. Picture Thebes raising its hoplites, bronze shields gleaming, spears forming an impenetrable wall. Now picture tanks rolling forward, their engines growling like beasts of iron. One shell, and an entire wall of men collapses. Arrows rain from the skies and are swept aside by helicopters firing rockets into their ranks. Sparta, famed for warriors who stood against Persia at Thermopylae, makes its stand. The Spartans fight with courage, but courage means little when faced with machine guns. Their legendary phalanx shatters in seconds. Athens watches from afar, a city that prided itself on philosophy and politics. It knows resistance is suicide. Its leaders bow, submitting without a fight. In weeks, the work that should have taken years is complete. Greece is united, not by persuasion, not by diplomacy, but by terror at weapons beyond comprehension. Alexander now commands the Greek world. His gaze turns eastward, to Persia. The Persian Empire at its height was vast. Millions of subjects, countless soldiers, roads linking cities from Sardis to Susa, Babylon to Persepolis. Their armies were immense, their wealth staggering. When Darius III, the great king, marched to meet Alexander, he brought forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands. But Alexander's weapons change everything. At the Battle of Issus, where historically the Macedonians clashed with Persian chariots, the field is transformed. Persian cavalry charges, their armor gleaming, only to be ripped apart by tank fire. Archers release their arrows, blackening the sky, only to be answered by jets unleashing bombs, explosions shaking the earth. The noise alone would terrify soldiers who had never heard anything louder than a thunderstorm. Entire units dissolve in minutes. Cities that would have taken months to besiege are leveled in hours by artillery. Even Babylon, the jewel of the Persian Empire, falls with little resistance. In our timeline, Alexander pursued Darius for years. Here, Darius flees at the very first clash, his empire crumbling almost instantly. What was once the greatest empire on earth now lies shattered, its might undone not by strategy, but by technology, centuries beyond imagining. From Persia, Alexander marches into Egypt. Historically, he was welcomed as a liberator, crowned pharaoh, and declared son of the god Ra. But with modern power, his divinity is undeniable. Imagine the people of Egypt, long oppressed by Persia, seeing Alexander's arrival marked by glowing aircraft in the skies, machines that roar like thunder and rain fire at will. Imagine the temples lit, not by torches, but by floodlights powered by generators. Imagine the Nile crossed not with rafts, but by floating bridges assembled in hours. Alexander is not just another conqueror. He is a god who commands the lightning itself. In this world, the myth of Alexander as divine is not propaganda. It is reality in the eyes of those who see him. Pharaohs once claimed divine right. Alexander proves it with every roar of his weapons. From Egypt, Alexander continues east into India. In our timeline, this was his greatest challenge. The Indian kingdoms fielded war elephants, towering beasts that terrified horses and men alike. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, Alexander fought one of his toughest campaigns against King Porus. But in this rewritten history, the elephants charge, only to be obliterated by rocket fire. Entire forests that might have slowed armies are cut open by armored bulldozers and vehicles. The Indian warriors fight bravely, but bravery cannot overcome drones raining missiles from above. Where his soldiers once begged to return home, exhausted after years of marching, here they march swiftly, victories coming in weeks instead of years. The Indus Valley falls. Alexander stands triumphant, his empire stretching across 3 continents. But what next? In our history, Alexander died young, and his empire fractured. Rome, still small in his lifetime, would one day grow to dominate the Mediterranean. But in this world, Rome never has a chance. Against Macedonian tanks and jets, the Roman legions are nothing. Their iron swords and rectangular shields are relics of the past. Rome, instead of becoming the greatest empire in Western history, is crushed in its infancy. Western civilization, as we know it, Roman law, Roman engineering, Roman roads, might never exist. Alexander, ever ambitious, might push further east into China. The Qin dynasty was on the rise, with disciplined armies and massive resources. But even the Great Wall cannot stop armored divisions. Chariots and crossbows crumble against automatic rifles. The dream of unifying East and West under a single rule, centuries ahead of schedule, is no longer a dream. It is inevitable. Alexander could have ruled an empire stretching from Spain to the Pacific. But power comes at a cost. Alexander was brilliant, but he was also impulsive, arrogant, and consumed by ambition. In reality, he pushed his men to exhaustion, demanded worship as a living god, and drank himself into ruin. So what happens when such a man commands nuclear weapons? Would he use them to intimidate or to annihilate? Would he wipe entire cities from the map just to cement his glory? Would his empire be a golden age of unity, or a nightmare of endless conquest, enforced by terror? In our world, Alexander died at just 32, his empire collapsing within years. But in this timeline, with modern medicine, perhaps he lives decades longer. With modern weapons, no general could oppose him. His empire would not fracture, it would endure. Greek culture would dominate not just the Mediterranean, but the entire world. Philosophy, science, and art could spread centuries earlier, or be smothered under the weight of dictatorship. Christianity and Islam might never rise. Democracy might never take root. Instead, humanity might live for centuries under one ruler, worshipped as a god, feared as a tyrant, his name echoing through eternity, Alexander the Great. So we leave you with a question. If Alexander the Great had modern weapons, would he have created a golden age of peace and unity? Or would he have plunged the world into an endless empire of fear, domination, and destruction? Thanks for tuning in to History Rewritten. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more alternate timelines. And remember, this is not the history you were taught. This is history rewritten.